So we're going to start in Flutterflow. You can really start from either side, Rowy or Flutterflow, but if you're going to use authentication, it's a bit easier to start on the Flutterflow side. So let's come over here to create a new project, and you've got a bunch of templates here. We're going to call it courses. And there's a bunch of templates here, and if you hover over, you can see everything that's included with it, both the number of screens and the features. But we're gonna make it ourselves, so let's just create new. When you create a new project, Flutterflow will ask you if you wanna set up Firebase, and yes, we do, so it's got this nice wizard that it'll walk us through. So just click next. And here's where we set up Firebase. So what we're gonna need is we're gonna need our Firebase project ID right here. So jump over to Firebase and let's set up a new project. So I'm here in Firebase and I'm gonna start a new project, call it courses, continue. If you want Google Analytics on your project, you can use it here, but I'm not gonna use it. So create your project, and this will just take a few seconds. Great, the project is ready and you can continue into it. All right, so we've got our Firebase project, but it's not connected to Flutterflow. It doesn't know anything about Flutterflow yet. So we need to do two things to make this connection. So first, you wanna come over here to users and permissions, and you wanna add a member, and you wanna add Firebase at flutterflow.io and give it the role of editor. And then you want to come into advanced permission settings here. And this is going to bring you into your Google Cloud Console. And you want to get that email address, firebase at flutterflow.io, and open it up. And we want to add two permissions. The first one is the Cloud Functions admin. And select that. And the last one is Service Account User. And you have to scroll to the bottom. There we go. Great. And that's it. So you can exit out of there. And now that we've connected Flutterflow to Firebase, let's create our database. So let's come over to Build and Firestore database and create a database. We're just going to use it in test mode right now. Before you actually deploy your app, you're going to want to switch it to production mode, but it's fine for now. You want to set your location. This is something that can't be changed, so make sure your server location is where you want it and enable. And there we go. We've got our Cloud Firestore all set up. So now let's get our project ID and we'll be ready to connect this to Flutterflow. So here's our project ID. You can just copy that and go back into Flutterflow and paste that in and connect. Beautiful. So Flutterflow recognizes our Firebase project. That's all great. Next, we want to auto-generate the config files. Generate the files. This should just take a couple seconds. Sweet. And now we see that Firebase setup is complete. Next, we want to enable authentication. But first, let's come over to our Firebase project and go over to authentication and get started. And now we'll just use the simple email password and let's enable that and save, and great, it's set up here. Now we can go back to Flutterflow and enable authentication. Down here, we're given the options to set our initial pages, that is our login page, and when the user is logged in, where should they be redirected, because they shouldn't go to the login page. Now, we only have one page right now, so we can come back and set that up later. But finally, let's create our users collection. This is the collection in Firestore that will save our users. Beautiful. Now we can start building. Great. So we're in here in Flutterflow and we see we've got some errors right here. And so let's just take a look at what it says. Now, these two errors just have to do with setting up those two initial pages. So we don't have to worry about those now because we'll set those up soon. But remember, you can't test your app until you resolve the errors. If you have warnings, you still can run your app. But let's deal with this now because it's telling us that our Firestore rules are not deployed. Now, what does that mean? Well, let's go there and then we can see. If you just click on the warning, it'll bring you to the place that's generating the warning or error. So we're here in our Firestore settings and you can see that our Firestore rules are not deployed. That is how we deal with permissions accessing our database. So right now we've only got one, our users database, you can see right here. And Flutterflow has automatically generated these rules so that everyone can create, read, no one can write, and no one can delete to this user's collection. That's fine for now, so let's just deploy these. Now, sometimes you get this bug in Firebase about the resource location. So if you go back into your console and come into your project settings, and you can see this default GCP resource location, let's select that. Here, the location's already been set, so if you just accept it, it should be fine. Great. So sometimes this takes a minute or two to propagate over to Flutterflow, so don't worry if it doesn't work right away. All right, so let's deploy this, and we can see that it's diffing. It's showing us the difference between our previous rules and now, so this is what we're adding in. That's fine. All right, great. So if we come over here, we can see our users collection that was set up for us, and that looks great. So now we've connected Flutterflow to Firebase, set up authentication, and now we're ready to do our data modeling. That is, set up our database structure for this project. And we're going to do that in Rowy. So let me show you the data that we're going to use and then jump into Rowy and set it up. All right, here's the data we're going to use. I just got a Google sheet and we've got a number of classes. We've got the name of the class, the department, and an image. Now we're going to get additional data, but we're going to do that using Rowy because of its more advanced functionalities. All right, so let's jump into Rowy. So I've got a workspace right here and we're going to create a new project. Let's give it a name. And of course, we're going to use Firebase. Next, we're going to sign in to the same Google account that you used to set up your Firebase project. Rowy is just telling us that we're going to grant it permissions. That's fine. Great. Next, we're going to select that project that we just set up, the courses project, and continue. Once again, same as in Flutterflow, it's showing us the addition to those Firestore rules that are going to be made. So you can review this, and when you're ready, you can just say set rules, and you're all good to go. Next, Rowy is asking us to set up Firebase storage rules. What we did before was just for Firestore, the database. But here, we need to give Rowy access so it can have control over images and file fields in your tables. So let's open storage rules page. We don't actually have to do anything in this page. We just have to load it, and then we can verify to make the connection. And then we can see here that we're just giving Rowy access to the Firebase storage and accept those rules, and Firebase storage is all set up. Great, we're all done. All right, so now the connection is made. And this is great because we've connected our three services together: Firebase, Flutterflow, and Rowy. So now let's get our classes data into Rowy. So let's create a new table, and we're gonna call this classes, create, and let's import our data. And of course, we've got a bunch of different options here. We could upload a CSV, but for us, let's just paste it in. So let's copy this and paste it in. Now, before we import these, we're going to do two things. First, we're going to be able to tell Rowy which columns we want imported. Now, you'll normally use this if you've got data with tons of columns and you only want some of them, but we want them all here. So we're just going to say, take all of these in. That looks great. Now, if you already have unique IDs, you can pick which column it is or just have Rowy auto-generate them. And that's what I'm going to do. Next, we're going to tell Rowy what kind of data this is, what type. So this first one here, the name of the courses, is going to be a short text. That sounds good. The next one, which department it is, also a short text. But I actually want it to be a dropdown because this is going to be a limited set of departments. And having a dropdown allows us to reduce user errors where they might type in a department incorrectly. So come down to single select. Great. And then finally, we've got a URL link here, which is correct. That's what these are, but they're links to images. And if we come in here, we don't see images, but it does. And we'll handle this later by telling Rowy to go out to these URLs, grab the images and put them in storage. That's the power of Rowy. We're not locked in right when we import. Okay, so that sounds good. And we can continue. One final preview of what it's going to look like. And let's finish. All right, great. Next, let's enrich this data in a few ways. First, let's grab these images right here. So let's add a column and we're going to just call it image. And what we want is a derivative field. And all of these options under cloud functions are going to run a script, a cloud function, under a certain condition. The action when you click a button, a derivative when there's a change in another field that you specify. So we're going to use that derivative. So let's set up a cloud function. Now, cloud functions are free to use on the base plan. We just need to set these up. Next, it's going to take us through Rowy run, which will set up these cloud functions. So we need to enable billing in our Firebase console, but you don't have to worry because you only get charged once you hit some minimums, and they're very high, so you probably won't hit them for a long time. So just come down here to the bottom left and go upgrade and select the Blaze plan. If you haven't set up a billing account yet, you can do that here. And continue. You can set your budget amount. I'm just going to set it real low. And purchase. Great, we're all set up. Now we can go back to Rowy. Now just scroll down and verify that you've got the billing set up. That's great. And select the region. I'm in Central, so I'll come here. And deploy. This will just take a few minutes. Great, it's all set up. Finally, Rowy tells you that these 3 services are now available. Extensions that allow you to connect with external services or run code under certain conditions, webhooks, and derivatives. All right, so we've got Rowy run set up and ready to set up this derivative column. Okay, so let's come in here. We'll call this image file. And it's gonna be a derivative. Great. First, you can select here what you want the default value type to be. We can just leave it undefined for now. Then as we move down, we've got listener fields. That is, Rowy will listen for changes in whatever field you put in here, and then we'll run this code down here when that happens, and then output this field type. So we're just gonna run these all at once, so it doesn't really matter for our purposes, but what's gonna really be necessary when you add additional items here is going to be that URL. So we're gonna select that image field that has our URL in it. Okay, and then what do we want out of this? Well, we want an image, right? So let's just scroll down and grab our image field. Okay, beautiful. Now we go down to our derivative script right here. And let's give us some more room. So what's going on here? Well, this is just TypeScript or JavaScript, because TypeScript is a superset of JavaScript. And this code will be run when that field changes. Okay, so let's think through what we want to happen. First, we are going to get the URL from that column, that image column. Then we're going to send that image into our Firebase storage. And when we do that, we'll be given back an image object with a bunch of data, like its download URL. And then finally, let's update that URL to the new Firebase location. All right, so first, let's get a reference to the URL of the image that we want to get. All right, so how do we do that? Well, first here, you've just got a helpful tip about logging. So whenever you're debugging a problem, you can use logging.log. We don't need this right now, so let's just delete it. And we're given some helpful information here that you can use imports from any NPM package. That's great. And just an example right here, but we don't need any of that, so let's just delete it. All right, so now how do we get that reference? Well, you can see that we've got this async function right here. And right before this, we're just saying, oh, that this is of type derivative. That's just a type that Rowy has set up. And inside this async function, we're passing in this object, and we have a bunch of helpful things that we can use. And the first one here, row, is the one that we're going to need right now. And it's exactly what you think it is. It's just the row of data that this is currently on. Because remember, this is going to be executing on every row. I know this is just sort of like a pop-up here in our field header. So we don't have sort of any context right now of this sort of sequential row by row that this is going to be executing, but that's what's going to be happening. So our first row, you can see it peeking out here, accounting. This function will be run for each of these rows. So here's a reference to that row and all of its data. So let's get this first. So let's just say const URL equals row dot, and of course we have auto completion. And what do we want? We want that image. Beautiful. Next, we're gonna take that URL and give it to Rowy to go get that image and upload it into Firebase. Now, I said a lot of steps there, and if we weren't in Rowy and we were just sort of writing this function as a cloud function from another service, we would have to do a bunch of steps. But thankfully, Rowy has given us a bunch of utility functions. And the one we're gonna be using here is this Rowy. And you can see here that this provides us a set of functions that are commonly used, such as easy file uploads. Okay, that's exactly what we want, right? So we're gonna say await, and we're awaiting this because it returns a promise. All right, so we wanna await Rowy dot, and we can just sort of like think through this together and figure this out. Storage, that makes sense, dot upload, yep, that's what we wanna do. And we can see here in the function definition that it wants a URL. So we can say upload and then dot, and we've got two different options. Data, that would be the image itself, but we're not giving it some blob, some binary data to upload. We're giving it a URL. Okay, great. All right, so what is this URL? Well, that's this right here that we just got. Wonderful. That's it. So it's gonna go out to the URL, upload that to Firebase, and then it's gonna return us that image object. And so let's store this in a variable. Great. Next, let's update that URL to the new URL that we got back from Firebase, so that whenever we're referencing it from our new location. Okay, so to do that, we're gonna use this ref object. And so we can say ref.update, and this will accept an object with key value pairs of whatever we want to update. So we wanna update the image property, and we want to update it with our new image.download URL. Beautiful. And finally, the last thing we want to do is, and we may have forgotten about this, is we need to dump in our actual image right here. So we are going to return our image. Now, you may be wondering, wait, why did I put this in an array? Why don't you just return like the bare image object? Well, I know that because I checked our documentation here. And if you go into derivative, you can scroll down and you can see some examples and see the type of things like here that are expected when you're returning an image. So right down here, we can see it returns an array of image objects. See, that's what we're doing. You can also look over here in the field types and image, and when you scroll down, you can see an example for when you're running a cloud function, and once again, we're returning an object. Okay, great. So this is all good. Let's update this. Because we've made changes to this cloud function, we have to deploy it, and this will just take a minute. All right, great. So now we can come into our derivative here. Let's close this out and evaluate all. And this is just sort of a helper button so that we can run this script on everything. We don't have to wait for it to listen to whatever we set up. Okay, beautiful. Our URLs are updated, and here are all our images. Next, I want some descriptions for these courses, but I don't want to write them. So let's use another derivative column and have OpenAI write them for us. Okay, so let's add a column. We're going to call this description. The field type is going to be a derivative, and we're going to grab the name. And the output field is going to be a short text, just like a sentence. And just like before, let's pull this open and let's get rid of this stuff right here and start writing. All right, so to do this, we're just gonna make an API call to OpenAI's completions endpoint and send the name of our course. So how are we gonna do this? Well, we're just gonna use good old-fashioned fetch. And because OpenAI returns a promise, we will await this, fetch, and inside fetch, it's going to want two things. First, it's going to want the URL, which I have in my clipboard. There it is. And second, it's going to be the object with all of that metadata about our call, like what kind of call, our body, etc., etc. So let's just throw that into an object and open it up. So first, our method, and that's going to be post. Next, we have our headers, and that's going to be an object, and just standard stuff, content type. And then we're going to have some authorization, and it's just standard authorization, bearer, and our keys. Now, we don't have these yet, and I don't want to expose them, so we're actually going to use this secret manager over here. And if you go into here, it'll bring you into your Google Cloud Console, and you can just add in your API keys. Now, I've already done that, so let's just grab a reference to it here. We're going to say const secret equals await Rowy dot, and here we've got our secrets, and we get them, that's right, and we just say the name, OpenAI. That's what I called mine in GCP. All right, great. So now I just dump this reference in here. All right, so we've got our method, we've got our headers, and all that we've got left is our body. And of course, this needs to be JSON stringified. And let's open that up. And what is this body gonna be? So there's a bunch of boilerplate stuff, but the first one is the only one we really care about right now. And that's gonna be the prompt, like that thing you write into ChatGPT. What is it? Well, I just wanna say, write a one sentence description of a course called, and here let's put in the name of our course. So this is going to be an interpolated string, so this actually can't be like that. Has to be in backticks, and we open that up and that. And so now how do we get it? Well, same thing as before. We can just say row dot, not image here, but our name. Beautiful. That's great for the prompt. And here's just a bunch of other boilerplate. All right. So after we make that call, we're going to await the response. So let's just say const result equals await response. All right. So that's our call. But after we make that call, it's going to return a response. So let's make sure we're dumping this in a variable. And we can just say const response. All right, great. So now we just have to get that response and JSON, and let's store that result. Oh, and it's yelling at me because I'm still inside that fetch. All right, nice. So now we've got this JSON result, but we need text out of it. So we're just going to finally return our result dot choices. And of course, this is just the particularities of OpenAPI's response. And we're going to say the first one, and we just want to turn it into text because that's what we're waiting for. Beautiful. All right, so let's update that function. Let's deploy it. All right, that's all built. So now let's just run our function. And nothing. So what's going wrong? Well, let's check it out. So if you go up here to Cloud Logs and it's loading my logs, we can see the function execution and what happened. And we can see here that it was an invalid API key. So let me just update my API key and then run it again. All right, that's built. So now let's run this again. Beautiful. Now we've got these great descriptions auto-generated. So now we're ready to go back into Flutterflow and start building out our project. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to bring in that table. And so if you come up to this plus here, and we want to name this the same thing that it's called in Rowy. So if we just go up here and look, we can see that it's called classes. Okay, great. Create. And we can start bringing our fields here. So what do we have? We've got name, department. Let's grab those. Name, department. And we've got our description. Now, I'm setting this as a string right here, and you might be wondering like, okay, well, that's a derivative. How do we know that it should be set to a string? Well, you want to go in here and you can see when we set it up that the output field is a text. So this code is being run prior to the writing of this. Also, if you go over to your Firebase and you go into that collection that you have, you can see your description here. That's that derivative field, and it's a string. And that's because the cloud function runs prior to writing this record here. Okay, so that's a string. That's all good. What else do we need? Well, we need our image. And for this, we'll just grab this field right here, image. And if you're wondering about capitalization and how you should be putting it in here, see, I've got lowercase. If you go in here, you can see the key, and this key will tell you the exact string that this field is called here. So even if you uppercase it, it's a standard practice to lowercase these field names. Okay. There's also a handy shortcut. If you hover over these icons in the header, you can just click to copy that field name. So image, and that's going to be a photo path. That's beautiful. So now we have everything we need for now. So let's go over here and just verify that our data is coming in correctly. Come over to our classes, and beautiful. We've got all of our data. Okay, great. So now let's get our pages in, and we're gonna be setting up 3 pages. First, a sign up page, then a sign in page, and then finally the main page that shows all the classes. Okay, and we wanna do this quickly, so we're just gonna use template pages. So if you come over here to a new page, and let's come to this auth tab right here, and let's just grab one like this. Let's grab this sign up one first, and we can just call it sign up. And let's grab a sign in page. And so let's go to auth again, and we want to go sign in. Great. And then finally, let's just get that main courses page. And if we go over to lists right here, we've got this classes list. That sounds good. We're going to call it classes. Beautiful. Okay, now first off, you come up here and you can see that we've got a bunch of errors. Now, if you're going to use template pages, because of navigation and authentication, you can just ignore these for now because once you set them up, most of these will go away. So let's first populate our classes page right here. So you can see that the way this template is set up is we have a list view, and let's collapse these down, and we've got a bunch of containers, which is each one of these things. So if we just collapse these all right here, you can see that we've just got 4 of these for a template. But what we're going to do is we are going to bind this list to our classes collection. So we don't need to have all of these. We just need to have one that we'll use for styling that will then be generated, each one of these, one for every document in our collection. So let's just come in here and delete these. Now we want to come into this icon right here, which is of course the same as our Firestore icon right here. This is for backend queries. And what we want to do is query a collection. These are from collections that we've already bound. And we want that classes list. And you have options here about what query type. Do you just want one document or a bunch of documents, or to count them? And you can also filter and sort them in various ways, but we're just going to confirm that base one. Now, this is telling us that, hey, we're going to generate items based on every one of your documents. Are you sure you want to do that? Yep, we're sure. Okay, beautiful. Now, you can see these are ghosted out to tell us that, hey, these are going to be coming from our backend query. Okay, that's great. So now let's just bind our data. So we need this class name right here, so we can click on it. And here's the field, and we want to set it from a variable. And when you hover over this document right here, you can see where this document is coming from. And it's coming from this list view right here, which is exactly what we want. And this works like that because once your apps start getting more complicated, you'll have data coming in, going out from all different places on your app. So Flutterflow tries to show you where this data is coming from so that you're binding it correctly. So we want to grab this class's document, and we're shown here the fields that we can bind it to. Well, here we want the name of the class, and when you have a bound variable, it's in these square brackets, so that's great. Here, let's just change the color so we can see it a little bit better. Change it to that white. And let's bind this to the description. So same thing as before, but that auto-generated description, that's great. And we don't need these for now. And we can just get rid of that. And instead of reserve, let's just change that to enroll. Okay, great. Now we'll deal with this enrolling feature in a second, but for now, let's deal with our auth. So let's go over to the sign up page. And we're not going to do anything with these different sign up types. So let's just delete that and let's set up our auth. So we come over to our sign up button here and let's go into our action flow editor. This is where we set up all of our logic. And this is already set up, but I want to show you how to do it if you have nothing here except for the bare button. So let's just delete this right now. And if you need more space to view this, you can just open it up in here. We're going to add an action, and you can search in here and just go for auth, Firebase authentication. Let's open that up, and we want to create an account. Great, so let's just walk through this here. We want to select an auth provider, and it'll just be email. What email field is it? Well, we're not sure yet, so let's close this out. And let's see here, we've got this email field here, and let's change the name so it's easier to see. So we're gonna say email field, and this is going to be password. Okay, great. So let's come back in here. And so now we can see, email field. Next, we've got the password field, and there we go, the password, and a confirmation password field. We don't have one, so we're just gonna reuse the one we've already had. Here, we want to create a user document because Flutterflow is integrated with our auth system and created that auth collection. So it knows that. And so, of course, we're going to want to create a user document. We tell it where our users are, and they're in this collection. And down here, we can set any additional fields. So that would be if we set up other things in our users, like maybe we had gender or year in school, we could add those here. But we don't have anything, so that'll be good for now. Close it up, and this page is all ready to go. Next, let's head over to our sign in page. And once again, we can get rid of this social auth, and let's go to login. Go to our action flow editor. We have a login, email, text field, that's probably this, and password field, that's probably this. So that should be great. Awesome. Now, before we test our app, we have to handle all of these errors. You don't have to handle the warnings, just the errors. So when you come up to the errors, it'll show you the list here. And when you click on it, it'll bring you to the place where the error is. So it's telling us here that we've got a navigate problem. And so let's look at what we're on. Okay, so this is on the sign up page. When they click on the sign in page, where does that bring them? And this is probably giving us an error because it's a template page. So where that is going to be different. So we just want to set that to sign in, and you can see that that'll go down to 8 in a second. Okay, great. So I'm just going to go through these real quick, and we're almost done. Here we have to set our entry page and our logged in page. So when you're logged in, you'll go to classes, and the entry page will be sign up. Okay, beautiful. Last thing you normally want to do when you've done a lot of database work is come into your Firebase right here and into the settings and redeploy your Firestore rules. It's going to show you the differences, and you're just going to want to deploy this. Beautiful. So now we're ready to test our app. All right, so here we are, and let's put in our email and password. Beautiful, there it is. Now it looks like we forgot to add in our background image, so let's go do that, and it's pretty easy. So let's just come into this container photo background, scroll down, set it from our path, classes document, and image. And just like that, we can instantly reload. Beautiful. And now we've got all of our images. So the last thing to do is to implement the enroll feature. Now, this is getting pretty advanced. but I want to show you how easy it is with Rowy. So now there are many ways that you can model your data for this type of use case. But what we're going to do is we're going to add a sub-collection to each class and add the users into that sub-collection. So let's come in and add a column. We're going to call this students, and the field type is going to be a subtable. Now the parent label, this is just the name. So we want it to be named based on the class name. So we'll call it name. That's great. And there we go. So we can just look in here and open up this collection. And of course, there's nothing in here yet. Now, at this point, we only need one thing. We just need a reference to our students. So we're just going to call this student. And the field type is going to be a reference to that student. Beautiful. So now let's bring this into Flutterflow. So we come back over to Flutterflow, come over to our Firestore, and let's add a new collection. This is going to be called students, and it is a sub-collection, and it's a sub-collection of our classes collection. Create, and remember we only have one field right now, and it is a student field, and the data type is a document reference to our users. Great. So now we've linked these up. Let's come over to here and we just need to set up our action. So we've got this button right here, and let's come over to our action flow editor. Let's open that up and let's add an action. Okay, so what do we want to do? Well, we're doing something with our backend, right? With our Firestore. So let's just twirl that open. And what are we going to want to do? Well, we've only really got two options. It's either create or update. And what we're actually doing is we're just creating the user document in that sub collection, right? So let's create that document. What collection is it? Well, it's that students collection. Now Flutterflow popped open this classes reference. Now what's this? Well, we told it what collection we're updating, but now we have to tell it like what document, what row is it that we're updating? So is it the accounting class that we're adding this student to? Is it the Firebase class? Which is it? So let's come in here. And you can see that once again, we've got this classes document, because let's think where we are. Let's get out of here so we can see what's going on. So we're inside this list view and we're enrolling in this child that's been generated from this call from each of our classes. And so that's what we're referencing. We're referencing whatever class the button is inside. Okay, so let's set this from our classes document, and we want a reference to that class. Great. Now we just want to set the fields. There's only one field, so Flutterflow automatically recognizes it. Field student, that's the same thing as we just said. It just gives us an option to change it if we need. And so which student is it? Well, it's going to be the authenticated user. That's what we want. And we only have the option that's available. So let's set our user there. Confirm, and we're all ready to go. So once again, we've made some changes to our Firestore here. So let's just come in and redeploy our Firestore rules. Okay, great. So we can instantly reload, and this build failed. Now, when you make a lot of backend changes, sometimes you just need to rerun the test mode, and that's fine because it'll just take a second. All right, so here we are. We're on this page because Flutterflow remembers that authenticated state. So let's just enroll. Well, what happened? Well, we can go check. Let's come into our classes and into our SEO course. And boom, there's our user. And we can click into it to confirm. And that's it. So just like that, we've created a very complicated app with cloud functions, authentication, API requests, all with Rowy. Let us know if you have any questions, and we'll see you in the next video.